Julie Ann Genter.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Tēnā koutou e te whare. I rise to speak on the budget policy statement. This document has a whole lot of areas that I would like to speak to, but I'm going to start by focusing on the second budget priority of this government, which is called building a more productive and competitive economy. Now, who could disagree with this objective? It's like motherhood and apple pie. The Green Party doesn't take issue with a competitive or productive economy. We would just say National's policies aren't actually going to deliver that. And even if they were going to deliver that, being competitive and productive isn't sufficient to create good lives for New Zealanders. The Green Party would also like to prioritise a fairer and cleaner economy, because that is what is going to make us better off in the long run. An economy that protects our precious natural environment and makes all people in New Zealand able to live healthier, happier lives is one that we should all be aspiring to. In the 8th year of this national government, we're starting to see just how short-term and unsustainable National's approach to the economy is. Their approach has seemed to boil down to an oversimplified and incorrect assumption that more is always better. In particular, doing more of what we've already been doing. We should keep doing more of that, according to National. Now, anyone watching at home probably knows that more isn't always better. We like that piece of chocolate cake. It's delicious, right? So if one piece of chocolate cake is good for us, metaphorically, more is even better. But each piece of chocolate cake we eat in a row will bring us diminishing pleasure, until eventually it makes us sick. So how does this play out in the economy? New Zealand had a successful dairy industry, and in the last decade, we are making some decent money off it. Well, National thought, great, we've got it. The best way to get richer is to convert more land to intensive dairy, make twice as much milk powder, and sell it overseas. So we're going to set a target of doubling primary exports, put in place a bunch of policies that favor increasing volume of primary exports. I heard Finance Minister Bill English say today something to the effect of, it's got nothing to do with us. Individual farmers weighed up the costs and benefits themselves and made the decision to jump on the dairy bandwagon, but they didn't make that decision in isolation from government policy. Let's just look at the facts. National's business growth agenda target is to double primary sector exports by 2025. Now, they don't specifically mention dairy in the primary industries policy, but dairy contributes just over 40% of New Zealand's primary industries export revenue. Therefore, it would not be unreasonable to suggest that the policy aims for the dairy sector to double by 2025. And I think it's fair to say that National has been encouraging farmers to go for volume rather than value. For example, they've provided a whole lot of subsidies for irrigation schemes, which encourage farmers to take on more debt to fund dairy intensification. The government's allocated $120 million to Crown Irrigation Investments Limited out of a potential of $400 million in funding. Total government spending on irrigation to 2016 will be $160 million. So another policy that National had, Landcorp, the government's farmer, was engaging in one of the biggest dairy conversions in the Southern Hemisphere. Now, of course, in the wake of the dairy price fall, Landcorp has subsequently wound back this plan by half, and their CEO was saying this week, quote, "The days of New Zealand continuing to expand its dairy footprint are largely coming to a close." So there is some acknowledgement amongst people in the industry that more is not better. And it is not anti-farmer to say that there are costs and risks in expansion. In fact, it's better for the original farmers, the existing farmers, especially the ones who were looking after the environment, trying to use water well. It would have been better for those farmers if the national government had put a price on the commercial use of water, had put in meaningful water quality standards to uphold the quality of our rivers, and had put a moratorium on dairy conversions, because all of that would have protected existing farmers from having to compete with new farms for water, having to deal with increased pollution pressure on our waterways. And of course, The lack of a meaningful price on carbon or the inclusion of agriculture in the emissions trading scheme meant that there was even more pressure or incentive to switch from forestry to dairy. And this was under the national government's watch. Debt soared during the dairy boom, when the payout in 2013 and 14 jumped over $8 a kilogram. People leapt on the bandwagon then to buy dairy farms at inflated prices or paid high prices to convert forest and other pastoral land to dairy. That wouldn't have happened if we'd had a different set of policies that were encouraging a more balanced approach to both farming and to economic development. So those conversions are actually a big part of the problem that we're facing today. They happened when we didn't have a price on water or a meaningful carbon price, and that made forestry less economic than it would have otherwise been. I will give them this. The National Party have been masters of rhetoric over the past 8 years, and that continues in the speeches from the government members. Their MPs have been very disciplined and consistent in using their slogans to assert the values of strong economic management and to distract from any legitimate criticism or debate of their policy. No, National doesn't want to engage in a constructive debate about whether or not their policies are going to achieve the stated objectives. So they always resort to the straw man argument. So when the Green Party has said there are costs and risks in dairy expansion, in the next conversion from forestry or pasture to dairy, intensive dairy, the National Party has said the Green Party hates farmers. The Green Party is anti-farming. They want to shoot all dairy cows. Now, obviously, that's not what we're saying. We're saying that probably doubling the production of dairy isn't the best way to protect existing farmers and ensure that they're doing well, or is it the best way to develop our economy if we want to have a long-term, sustained prosperity that protects our environment and adds value to those goods that we're selling overseas? But the National Party says if you criticize our policies that are encouraging the expansion of dairy, then you are against all dairy. And that is not what the Green Party has said, and it's certainly not what we're saying now. We see something similar with the TPPA. If anyone raises criticisms or questions about the costs of the TPPA to the New Zealand taxpayer and the New Zealand economy in the medium term, the National Party asserts, well, you must be anti-trade. The Green Party hates trade. That's what we hear from the National Party. Well, that's a straw man argument, because the National Party has failed to address the serious questions and concerns about the costs of the TPPA as compared to the benefits. And if we say today that National's failed policies promoting the expansion of dairy haven't served farmers, haven't served our environment, haven't served our economy, and we need to learn some lessons from that, their response is, well, if you actually care about farmers, then one, you won't support the protection of our waterways, you shouldn't, but also that we should therefore sign up to all of the provisions in the TPPA, even those ones which we know are going to cost the New Zealand taxpayer and the New Zealand economy in the medium term. Let's have a real debate about policy. The Green Party is not opposed to reducing tariffs, but I don't think it's anti-trade to acknowledge the fact that the gains for our economy as a whole from the TPPA are marginal at best. And for dairy, it's only a reduction in costs of $102 million by the time it's fully implemented on exports of $4.6 billion. So that's only a 2% gain. Is that going to make up for the big drop in global dairy prices? Certainly not. The Green Party is pro-trade, and we want trade agreements that level the playing field, just like we want meaningful environmental standards that level the playing field here in New Zealand so that those responsible farmers can thrive and the other farmers are forced to clean up their act. That's how we get a thriving economy. And we want the same thing on a global scale. We want trade agreements that level the playing field by protecting environments and people, not by protecting the ability of multinational corporates to maximize their profits at the expense of taxpayers. The Green Party supports policy that will protect the things that matter most: our pristine natural environment, our most vulnerable people. By doing that first, by putting people on the planet first, that is how we can create an economy that actually delivers news for New Zealand.
Thank you.